goes
It
right.
works.
So I don't.
Yeah.
Everyone. Oh, sorry. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for investing your time with us this Wednesday morning. My name is Natalie Gemiola, and I am the Funding Information Network Manager for Candid at Westlake Porter Public Library, which is located in Westlake, Ohio, a suburb of Cleveland. Today, we have an amazing panel on storytelling in the age of COVID-19, where we'll be talking about the value of strategic storytelling to cultivate relationships with funders and inspire philanthropic support for your nonprofit organization. Our panelists will share their own successes and challenges of fundraising during the coronavirus pandemic and offer some insight into new methods of organizational advocacy and networking to meet the needs of the communities that they serve. Ideas that may offer some inspiration for things that you can do at your own organizations. Now, I would like to introduce you to our presenter and moderator for today's program, David Holmes, Program Manager for Midwest Candid. Take it away, Dave.
Thanks, Natalie. Hi, I am Dave Holmes. I'm the Programs Manager for Candid in our Midwest office, and I'll tell you a little bit about Candid in just a second. I'm joined today by Sam Petticord. Sam, you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone.
Sam Petticord is the Network Engagement Manager for Candid in our Midwest office. And we also have Hannah Stofan here. She's not pictured. She is our Programs Assistant. She's going to be joining us today. If you've never heard of Candid, I'll tell you what it is. Candid's been around for just over a year. Before that, we were two organizations, the Foundation Center, which has been around in Cleveland for over 40 years, and nationally over 60 years, collecting information on philanthropy and collecting information on what foundations are giving and helping people find that through the foundation directory and other resources. Last year, we partnered with GuideStar, who's been around for over 35 years, collecting information on nonprofits and what they do. So together, we are trying to be candid about the information that we gather about both nonprofits and funders. Millions of nonprofits get trillions of dollars around the world. Candid finds out where the money comes from, where it goes, and why it matters. And you've probably had interaction with us before in one form or another. We do a lot of research on funding and foundations. The foundation directory, which lists grant makers, will help you find out who to get money from. We also talk a lot through trainings in how to write grant proposals and how to do your fundraising planning and how to work with your board. So we have a regular series of trainings, and we really try to help you find the information that you need to keep going. We also have been very active in responding to COVID-19. So, and with this resource sheet, you might want to take a look at some of the links here. We have a lot of COVID-19 resources. We've also posted a lot about racial equity recently because of all the issues that have been going on and coming out in everybody's lives. So I hope you will take a look at the different resources that we have and pay attention to them. If you want to find out more about who we are, you can go to candid.org and sign up for our online newsletter at bit.ly/grants/newsletter. So this particular program is not about us, it's about the speakers that we are talking about here. And I want to thank Natalie Gemiola one more time again for bringing us in and having us moderate this program, Storytelling in the Age of COVID. And we are recording this. You will receive a link to the recording via email in the next 48 hours. So hopefully you'll be able to participate. You can send in questions through YouTube, and we are monitoring those so that you can get some of your questions answered. But I have a number of questions myself that I'm going to be asking our panelists, and I want to introduce them. So our panelists include Don Harrington, who's the Cleveland Action Strategist for IOB, Phyllis Harris, who's Executive Director of the LGBT Community Center of Greater Cleveland, Caroline Linden, who's Manager of Programs and Operations for SVP Cleveland, Social Venture Partners, and Chrissy Stonebreaker Martinez, the Co-Director of the Interreligious Task Force on Central America and Cleveland Pandemic Response. So thank you guys all for being here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a bit and ask everyone here to first introduce themselves and then tell me what you mean by storytelling. What is it? What does storytelling mean to you? So I'm going to ask for someone to start off. Chrissy, do you want to start? Just say who you are, and you can shake your head. That's fine. You don't have to start. Do we have another option here? Dawn Arrington, why don't you start? You can unmute yourself.
I actually saw that Phyllis unmuted herself before me. So
oh, okay. You guys can, it's not a competition.
I think she wins.
So
okay.
The question was, what does storytelling mean?
Yeah, who are you, first of all, and what do you do? And then secondly, what do you mean when you talk about storytelling?
Okay, so my name is Phyllis Evans Harris. I'm the executive director of the LGBT Community Center of Greater Cleveland. I love Cleveland. I'm a Clevelander, born and raised here, and I'm a nonprofit practitioner. So I've worked in many nonprofits over the last 25 years, and they typically have socially charged missions because I'm an activist. And I have really enjoyed being able to also bring the tradition of storytelling. So the oral tradition in my culture is super important because we didn't necessarily have records, right? And so stories got handed down from generation to generation. Right now, my mother, who's not very old, but in her mid 70s, is the keeper of the stories for our family. And so we can be quite loquacious when we're talking about, our history and stories. And I think that has, as someone who's an introvert, really honestly, I would observe everything, but I was making up the stories in my, in my subconscious, and I'm at a point where I need to tell those stories more effectively now in my work. And so I've been able, now that I'm older, to see the connection around storytelling and how it matters. I've worked at the center for 8 years, and the center has been doing amazing work for now 45 years. But we just got really, really good at telling our story in terms of what we do. And I'm constantly learning about how to tell the story in a way that is impactful, in a way that our stakeholders can hear and feel and see themselves in the stories that we tell. And it's a very useful tool that sometimes get overlooked, especially in nonprofits that are smaller, because you're so about doing the work that you don't have often enough time or capacity to tell about the work. Storytelling is really important. And I've loved, evolving as a nonprofit practitioner and an executive director with this particular organization, which has the power of story. There's so many stories of unique lives and triumphs and tragedies and fighting for rights, that it would serve us really well. It serves us really well to be able to tell our story. And as I've evolved here, the fact that we've gotten better, we still work on it. So it's something that we're constantly working on so that we can connect to people and people can see us. And so I like storytelling.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you. Who wants to go next? Dawn, do you want to go next?
I can go now.
Okay.
Thanks, Phyllis, for that. I echoing everything that she just said about storytelling. I also think that storytelling is like, if we're being real about who's here on the call and the purpose behind this particular webinar, I think that that storytelling is a perspective builder, and it is a phenomenal fundraising tool. Telling your story allows other people to know literally what's going on, what's happening. And it helps you kind of sharpen your pitch to people. You're gonna tell your story over and over and over again, sometimes like to the point where you're just like, I'm sick and tired of telling this story, but you're gonna have to change it or adjust it for different audiences, for time constraints, for just how you're feeling that day. Like, maybe I don't want to talk about this particular part of the story. And I think storytelling always evolves because, I could be telling a story today about, say, a fundraising campaign that I have up, But then as I'm raising money for it, that story may change because now like there's a whole new group of people who know more about this particular project. And so like my story may evolve from, you know, this is something that I want to do to, hey, this is getting ready to happen because X amount of people have donated to it. So, you know, it builds perspective, but it can also evolve. But at the end of the day, storytelling is the most powerful tool to be able to share your perspective about what's going on in the world and what you intend to do about it.
Terrific. So tell us a little bit about your organization, just real briefly.
Oh, forgot about that part. My name is Dawn Arrington. I am the Cleveland Action Strategist for an organization called IOBI, stands for In Our Backyards. We are a crowdfunding platform, a nonprofit crowdfunding platform, and we believe that local knows best. You know what's best for your community, you know what's best for your neighborhood, and we are all about coaching you and providing you strategies around storytelling and movement building and organizing, because asking people for money is actually a form of organizing. It doesn't have to be super uncomfortable. And my job is to be there with you and coaching you through the process of building a campaign, securing a team, and going out there and getting that money. And also recruiting volunteers, because sometimes people think that they have to go it alone, and they don't. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so my job is to coach you through all of that stuff.
Great. Thank you so much, Dawn. That's terrific. Chrissy, I'm going to ask you to go next. What would you like to say about storytelling and your organizations?
Yeah. I really want to hit on something that Phyllis said about oral traditions. You know, I am Latina. My family is from Colombia, and I'm a descendant of Embera peoples. So as a displaced Indigenous person, I too really find belonging in the oral tradition. A lot of my Indigenous friends and family have talked always about the reason why colonization was so, why there are so many Indigenous peoples who adopted the religion of colonizers, is because they had oral religions. And so those religions, those Indigenous religions, were very adaptable to incorporate new ideas and new concepts while maintaining their traditional concepts as well. So I actually have a really huge anxiety about the written word because I'm a storyteller, and because I also, as the eldest daughter in my family, hold a lot of stories and anticipate being a keeper of stories in future generations. So I really appreciate the topic today that we're talking about, and I'm the co-director of the Interreligious Task Force on Central America, or IRTF Cleveland, and we really started with an amazing story. There were two women from Cleveland, Jean Donovan, a Case alumna, and Dorothy Kazel, an Ursuline sister and also an alumna of John Carroll, who were murdered alongside Maura Clark and Ida Ford, two Marinol sisters from New York, in El Salvador in 1980. Now, the Cleveland Catholic Diocese, as you all may know, there's a big Catholic population in Cleveland, and the Cleveland Catholic Diocese has been known among Catholic circles. I'm not Catholic, but you know, this is part of our influence. The interreligious means all faith and no faith. But the Catholic circles in Cleveland that are very vibrant, the diocese started a mission project in El Salvador in I believe 1960. in the 1960s. I don't want to get it wrong. And so people who were in Cleveland of Central American descent, people who were working on, or South American descent, people who were working on Chilean and Nicaraguan refugee issues came together with the Catholic Church, and then alongside Jewish and secular and Protestant, and now we have all sorts of religions involved in our organization, to speak out against the U.S. support of this violence in El Salvador. The people who murdered these 4 women, including the 2 from Cleveland, Jean Donovan and Dorothy Kiesel, were trained and funded by the United States. And so our founding is quite a story. And that root of anti-militarism, of supporting true democratization, of supporting liberation for all peoples, and of interrogating really our own complicity in how this violence came to be, is really what has made us continue to be so relevant today. And so today we're an organization that continues to organize and to agitate. We are organizers, we are movement builders. We exist as a nonprofit because we don't want to contribute to the war tax. And we exist as an interreligious organization because we want to make sure that people are able to get sanctuary who are refugees, who are seeking asylum. And our priority is organizing and agitating people to move toward greater progress. And we do that by focusing on racial justice, economic justice, environmental justice, on anti-militarism, on LGBTQ solidarity. Phyllis and I, part of why I wanted to be on this panel is I'm like, oh, Phyllis is there. Okay, I'm good. But, we have to work on all of those things that I just mentioned, and we have to work on them all at the same time, or we're never going to see real liberation. And so I know a lot of nonprofits talk about mission creep, and it's really hard to maintain your focus. But our focus is solidarity, building relationships. And so that is part of why our organization helped to found Cleveland Pandemic Response, because we're really about movement building, and we're really about trying to come up with solutions for how we're going to weather the dumpster fires that we are in every single day, and coming up with a new vision for how we want to interact with each other.
Right, terrific. Thank you so much, Chrissy. I'm going to ask Caroline. Caroline has a couple of slides that she wants to share, so I'm going to share my screen again and bring those up.
Yeah, you can wait okay.
All right, it's up to you.
No worries. You can start. Yeah, so I'm Caroline Linden. I'm the manager of programs and operations with Social Venture Partners Cleveland. SVP is a nonprofit that has a dual mission to build better philanthropists and stronger nonprofits. So we have a group of partner donors who pool their money and also their skills to work collaboratively with nonprofits. And part of the reason I'm here is to share about this new tool we have called We Care for Cleveland, which is wecareforcle.org. This is a tool that we recently launched in light of COVID-19 as a place where nonprofits can tell the story of how COVID-19 is impacting their organization. We offered it in collaboration with a lot of organizations in Cleveland. The list is here, but includes BBU, Candid, the Cleveland Leadership Center, Grants Plus, Greater Cleveland Volunteers, Philanthropy Ohio, the Char and Rockefeller Family Foundation, the Cleveland Foundation, and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland. This is kind of how it looks on the home screen. As I said, it's wecareforcle.org. And we've been having nonprofits add their stories, since the early days of the pandemic. And you can see here, I took the screenshot yesterday. As of now, there's more than $21 million that nonprofits have lost because of COVID-19. That includes direct dollars, but also volunteer hours lost. Let me do the next slide, Dave. And nonprofits are also able to share their story more directly on the page. This is just an example. One of the nonprofits we work with, University Settlement, this is their page. You can see they can share a story, and they can also share the amount of volunteer hours they've lost, the amount of dollars they lost, and then also ways that you can help now. You can see for them, providing senior food delivery is a way people can help now. And some nonprofits have virtual volunteer opportunities or volunteer opportunities that can be done socially distant ways. Some don't, but it's a way people can log on and see ways they can directly help nonprofits right now. And these COVID-19 impact, those images, when you click on them, it's where nonprofits can tell a more anecdotal story. So if you go to the next slide, you can see when you click on this, they have more writing about how COVID has directly impacted their organization's work. And then the next slide as well. This is an example of another nonprofit. I shared them to kind of lay out where all of the dollars and money lost has come from. You can choose on your page to be more explicit with where you've lost your money. So they shared their details, which shows how, nonprofits have lost dollars in a lot of different ways, from event fundraising, from furloughed staff, from volunteer hours lost. There's a multitude of different ways. And they also had a great example of a volunteer opportunity that is done virtually, which they have distance learning videos that needed captions. So yeah, that's just an example of how this site works. And it's a great place where if you haven't added a profile yet, you can go to wecareforcle.org and you can add your nonprofit profile, share your story. You can direct your donors to it. After you hear more about how you can tell your story from this panel, it would be a great place for you to put in the story of how COVID has impacted your organization.
That's terrific. Thank you so much, Caroline. And this touches on what we're really here to talk about today, which is storytelling, but not just storytelling in general. You can see how it's a part of all of the organizations that we've been hearing about. And it's the basis of the organizations that are successful in the nonprofit world. But in the last 3 months, 4 months now, I can't even tell you how long it's been, things have started to change drastically. How have things changed for your organization related to storytelling or how stories are told in the past few months? Does anybody want to talk about that? Phyllis?
So storytelling, how it's changed in the past few months is that in November, we hired a communications and marketing person. And so what that did was allow us to more consistently tell our story via our e-newsletter, through all the platforms that people are paying attention to now, and that they were paying attention to more heavily during the stay-at-home orders, which is social media, and so Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all those things. And so I mentioned that a lot of times nonprofits, we're so busy doing the work, and you have multiple roles, and that sometimes you're not able to tell your story effectively. And you may be telling it, but not in the way that can often have the most impact. So I think how it's changed for us is that in the past, we've had very dedicated staff members here who have learned communications and PR and marketing along the way, sort of like trial by error, and every time we got, a little bit better with maybe getting our e-newsletter out consistently twice a month, where it wasn't just random, but we actually had a schedule. And so since hiring this position, we really have had the opportunity, like I said, to tell our story more broadly with expertise around timing, with impact. The other thing that happened in telling our story was, we have a lot more visibility than we've had in maybe the recent past. due to the fact that we've moved into a new facility. And so it's a great story to tell, like it's good news. People don't like to invest in sinking ships, right? People like to invest in something that I think that they know is going to grow and expand and maybe have some sustainability, because we love that word, even as challenging as it is in our sector, to think in a way that your organization is programming is going to be sustainable, your operations are sustainable. And I think marketing and communications is a way to do that. This last several months, we knew that we had an opportunity. We already had some momentum because we had the kind of visibility that people are kind of checking us out. And so we wanted to capitalize on that opportunity. When we received the stay-at-home order, we follow suit in terms of making sure that we were mindful of people's safety. But the other thing that was very clear to many of us here at the center, my colleagues and I, is that we needed to be very loud about the vulnerabilities that LGBTQ folks have, right? So we already are fighting for our rights and respect around adequate medical care, around housing, around employment. We still are a community that is impacted by folks who contract and are living with HIV. So they have autoimmune deficiencies. And if you add that to if you are a trans-identified person and the workplace is not up to speed around inclusion of all identities, the challenge that folks who are trans-identified or LGBTQ identified have with obtaining employment in a way that they can be wholesome and whole, at their jobs. And so we saw ourselves as the people that we do see ourselves as the folks that we serve. And so it's important for us to say, don't forget about, as we are being amazing and philanthropic here in Cleveland and in this region, please don't forget about LGBTQ folks and the unique needs that we have. The challenges that we already face are going to be exponential, given we're all going to be challenged with what COVID is bringing us. And so one of the things that happened, and I don't know if you want me to keep talking about this, is how we had to manage. And so we needed to tell our story. And so I would say to my team, my activist wings are on. We got to be in these people's faces. We have to say, what about the center? What about LGBTQ folks? What about Black trans people? What about, our youth who are already dealing with family rejection around their identities and who come here for a place of refuge, a place of affirmation? How are they doing in being at home? How are they, and so we got really loud about the fact that we didn't want to be left behind. And so we are accustomed to, taking to the streets around, marching around our visibility and our rights and things like that. And so we did that. The other thing that happened is we got challenged like everyone else about how to, we're in this new building. We've established ourselves as an anchor organization here, and we are just in here under a year, just getting momentum and staffed up in the way that we can really manage and deliver the way that we want to for Greater Cleveland, for our region. And COVID happens and we shut down. So my board, who are smart, dedicated individuals who want this organization to survive, said, come back to me with a plan to cut your operating budget at 50%. After I fell out for a little while and recovered, one of the things that we did, and it's a long story that I love to be all dramatic about, but I want other folks to have an opportunity. But what we did was we gathered ourselves as a staff, and this is really to the credit of our development director, Ellie Turin, who I had the idea to bring together experts to take a look at the center, because you didn't see us for years, right? you see us now and it looks like we're doing great, you know, but it costs to have this building and deliver services the way that we want. We're getting the expertise on board that we need. We need to tell you who we are. And so I gathered 4 experts from the nonprofit sector and the fundraising sector, nonprofit fundraising sector, and someone who I thought was a data geek, you know, who understood research and data. And we developed a case study where we talked about our organization. We shared our budgets, our finances, our forecasts, our hopes, our dreams. We talked about our people, the people who work here, and why it was important to keep our staff employed. And we have these experts read our case story, our case study, and we, as graduates of nonprofit programs and MBA programs here, you know, we were all happy to say, oh, we remembered all the case studies we had to read. So we were able to put together one that I think was really compelling, that told our story, both our story and our history, but also our realistic today's finances and what we were thinking about for the future. And we got a positive response from those experts, including our board members who read our case study, who I think learned a lot more because we're on the inside doing the work. And we came up with a solution that was accommodating to all the things that we were facing around the unprecedented times and not knowing what to expect necessarily, but in care of our community and putting them first and including our staff here. And we got to a solution that has us in a good place right now. So it was that opportunity to take that storytelling and to put it in a format that people who were concerned and worried could really take in and see as, oh, so here's the beginning of this around who this organization is and what they do, and this is their mission, and this is the money that they already have, and this is the potential that they have. And so let's make a better decision around that, around what our next steps should be, what moves we should make going forward. And so that's
terrific. That is like tying everything together. The storytelling doesn't go away just because the story has changed. Right. I mean, it has to be something that you keep responding and you show who you are in this new story. I think that's a really great.
You have to know who your audience is. So, you know, me just having an impassioned plea and saying, no, I'm not going to do that. That wouldn't work. Would not have gone well with, you know, my board leadership and you know, and folks. And so you have to know how to.
People want to know the rest of the story. What are you going to do then if you're not going to do this? That's exactly it. Our other panelists, do we have anything that's changed recently or anything you want to talk about with your own organizations?
I wouldn't say that like our organization experienced a whole lot of change when we're talking about like telling stories. But for sure, a lot of our project leaders, we call them IOB leaders, but our project leaders were experiencing, they came to us with this urgency, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen. Like all of a sudden, as Christine put it, there's this whole dumpster fire that like we're all trying to put out, or we're all trying to contribute to, you know, tamping down and figure out, you know, what's going on and how we can help. And so a lot of people turn to us to leverage the platform to be able to, you know, organize within their communities in a very fast pace. So if there was any type of, I guess, change, was the amount of projects that came through and the amount of people that needed support to get their campaigns up and to process those donations in a fairly quick manner to be able to actually, you know, move things forward. So we had like a project here in Cleveland with a group of folks that live on the west side in Ohio City, and like their whole thing was there's a Lakeview Tower, think it's Lakeview Tower on West 25th, and it's a senior apartment building. And so the residents that were there were like, we didn't get a chance to get to know who our neighbors are. Like, you know, we live in this neighborhood, and we hadn't had the opportunity to like go in and talk to folks at this building before COVID hit. And now we really need to be careful because this is a vulnerable community. And so like being able to tell that particular story, like the why they want to do something, and then turn that into a way of organizing other resources so they could take them care packages and food and art activities and still create connectivity in a time where, you know, it felt like that was being discouraged for safety reasons. I think we've since, you know, come to a better understanding of different ways that we can create connectivity in times like this. And so I think that those are more the tweaks around like what stories had to be told or should be told. But then also a word about like the people who, I got calls from people who were like, oh, well, I have this project up and like this is happening and I'm not so sure that this is still relevant. Or should I still be asking people for money when, you know, folks are hurting? And, you know, my school of thought is that if it was important before COVID, it's important during, it's important after.
Mhm.
And so you may have to pivot or shift your story. Take Angela Miller. I talk about her all the time. I love her. I met her last year. She did an IOB campaign. She was raising like $1,500 and she raised $10,000 for her first time out. And so I just enjoy her immensely as a person and as an advocate for this type of fundraising. And she was doing a project around like bringing art to communities that normally don't have access to art, like as families. It's not necessarily a huge priority for them if we're talking about like, you know, basic needs versus, you know, having art in the home. And so she was doing Cleveland Art Week, and, you know, people were going to be invited to come out to the park and create art together. And of course, can't do that right now, not the way that she wanted to. And so we got on the phone and she was like, you know, maybe I should just shut my campaign down. And I was like, maybe you shouldn't, because it's still important. I'm a mom, I have 2 kids, and when they got kicked, you know, school closed, luckily for me, I embrace like arts and crafts. So I got glue guns, I've got, you know, glitter, and I've got paint, and I've got markers, and I've got all of the things that they could participate with here at home. But I walked into like a Target and that aisle was bare. So you have people who already don't have access to certain things, and then they go to a store to try to find items to you know, entertain their kids or, you know, keep them occupied, and it's gone. And so, you know, when we were talking on the phone, I said, well, Angela, you know, you could just pivot a little bit. It's still the idea of access to art is there. You can just pivot it and turn it into this thing where you're supplying like these art kits to families, and so they can still participate, and we can do something virtually. And she was like, oh, I can do that? I'm like, yeah, girl, yes, please do it. Like, please pivot, please, you know, make this turn. And so she did. And like, she raised the money really, really quickly. Like her campaign was a little stalled. And then like, all of a sudden she changed the focus just a little bit to accommodate families where they are versus, you know, trying to like bring them out. And her project, it took off. She got fully funded, and like she's putting those packages together to mail them out now. So I just think that, like, you know, at the core, what's important to you? Like Phyllis said, what's important to you? You know, what makes this organization go? What makes your mission thrive is is important. And so I also want to make sure that I give you a resource, because we have what's called a leader toolkit. And in that leader toolkit, there's a section about storytelling. And there's like sort of like headers or tips and points about like, you know, what makes for an effective story. Oh, yay, we're sharing it. All right. And so here you can see telling a story that sticks. So you want to keep it personal, but you also want to, you know, be dramatic. You know, like I think to Phyllis's credit, like be dramatic, be super dramatic about like what happens when you do this thing or if it doesn't happen. You do want to show the big picture, but you also want to keep it focused. Like big picture is families are not necessarily treating art as like a number one needed necessity, but keeping it focused about why that's important to families, especially families that maybe don't have access to high quality arts programming, either in the home or in their community. And so there's all of these tips and tools in here in the leader toolkit that is free for anyone to access. And I'm also available to talk about any of them if you have questions about it. But I just think it's important that we recognize that you're going to have to shift and pivot in order to better connect to your audience for whatever reason, whether you're asking them for money, you're asking them for their time, you're asking them for their energy behind something, or to even ask other people to help you support this thing. I think your donors or the people who are supporting you can also be a part of your team. So I just think, you know, it's important to take a second and think about like shifts and being a little bit of flexible around what story you're telling and how it relates to what you're trying to get done. But at the end of the day, what's most important to remember is that that if it was important before this, it's important now. You just may have to shift a little bit.
That's such a great thing. I want to underline that about 8 times. It's like the people are in a situation right now, it seems like, where they don't have the story that they need to hear. You know, you were talking about, well, should the one person like wanting to stop what they're doing because of the change? I'm like, well, isn't it still important? Isn't it still something that people need? You have to be able to then say, here's my story, and I'll tell you why that story is relevant now. And I'll tell you why this is going to make a change for you. Chrissy or Caroline, do you want to add anything to this? Thank you both, Dawn and Phyllis, for sharing those stories. Do you have anything to add, Caroline?
Sure. I guess I've always said personally that I'm passionate about passionate people. And I think that comes out in storytelling a lot, because great storytelling is sharing a piece of yourself. But I think with COVID-19, why did I say COVID-19?
Any of the COVIDs.
Ooh, it's early. Anyway, I think with COVID-19, it's both a challenge and an opportunity for storytelling, because it can be hard to connect with people virtually. When you're not meeting in person, it can be hard to have your passion and your story come through. So it's a challenge for that reason. I know we all have had Zoom fatigue and known how it can be harder to connect with people over Zoom, but it's also an opportunity because people are looking for connection and ways to help their community more than ever right now, I think. And if you find a way to share your story in these virtual channels, I think that it's high time that people will want to connect with you.
Yeah, and sharing your story in a format like on We Care for CLE, and later on Sam is going to be talking about GuideStar. It helps you get that story straight so that you can tell it to other people and you can make that story widespread. Chrissy, do you see anything particularly with the Cleveland pandemic response or with any of the other things that you work with?
Yeah, I was gonna actually ask you to pull up the IRTF link that I gave you. You know,
we'll do that.
I really appreciate Dawn's reiteration of what's important then is going to be important now and also into the future. And I think too, you know, we need a new normal the things that were important before are more important. They're more important than ever. As Phil, just like the stories that Phyllis was talking about our own people, is that like we have certain realities that we experience that are just really enhanced and amplified by this. So I'm not seeing.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble bringing it up, but
That's all right.
this
As we
is
work on
live.
that, I'll talk about a few other points. So
Is it linked from the main page of IRTF? I'm having trouble getting that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring that up here for you. Share that screen. And so here's the main website, IRTF Cleveland.
Can you go to the home button? Yeah.
Yeah.
And click on that actually.
There we go.
And it's also in the chat. If you need the link directly, it's also in the YouTube chat.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so we have never taken government funding in 39 years, even though we do international work, and a lot of organizations like ours take money from the State Department. What happens with that money and with other human rights organizations, including I'm a representative to the UN with the International Fellowship of Reconciliation, and a lot of organizations that work with the UN really rely on militaries to make peace. And what we really need is unarmed. We need a dismantling of that, as well as we need a dismantling of a lot of other things. And so what we tried to convey as we were assessing how are we going to operate in the next year and a half at minimum, because we were seeing that the reports from all of the top medical physicians here in Cleveland were saying, you know, this is going to happen for a very long time, and there's going to be multiple waves. And we know that this is going to be our reality for a very long time. So we talk a lot about why is it that some of us are in this exacerbated crisis, right? And we know that that's root causes. And so as part of our work, especially as undocumented people, has been to change the narrative about what we need, rather than asking for sympathy or for pity. We're really uncovering what it is that got us here in the first place, right? So normal has been for a very long time training military officials. It has in counterinsurgency and civilian targeted warfare. Normal for a very long time has been under-resourcing and underfunding communities here in our backyard, as IOB says, right? Normal has been refugees who seek safety at our borders, who are criminalized. Refugees, people who are escaping violence, come to meet more violence, right? That has been normal for a really long time. And so we need something different. And I think that, yes, Zoom fatigue is very real, but this moment has also offered us the opportunity to deepen our solidarity with our international partners in ways that we could never afford to do before, right? And so we're seeing the silver linings, and we're transitioning into something a little bit different. If you could pull up the cleveland.recovers.org site, that would be super helpful. And I have some links I'm gonna drop in our chat so that we can share with our viewers. So I was planning a party on the night that a bunch of political, there was supposed to be 2 major political rallies here in Cleveland, March 12th. And I was really amped about that. And those rallies being canceled were really the first time that anything had started to shut down in Ohio, March 12th, right? And I'm bummed because I I can't have a drink with my friends at Becky's after, downtown, after going and fighting for change that I see in just one way. Voting is just one way to fight for change. And so the very next day, there were a lot of movement activists in Cleveland who were asking each other, how are we going to respond to this? How are we going to take this opportunity, this moment, and use it as a tool for organizing, for mobilizing people, and for caring for each other? So in the theory of mutual aid, we built this site, clevelandrecovers.org, because IRTF has a lot of local partners, but also has partners nationally and internationally. I had some friends who had told me about this Recover site, that we use this platform actually to help in the aftermath of Katrina, and this platform has evolved. There are many other platforms as well. There's time banks that people use, et cetera. But in the spirit of mutual aid, we really wanted to create something that would make sure that we would help people who are falling through the cracks, and move in ways that we know that sometimes larger organizations that are very institutional and have more hierarchical structure can't work with in the same way. We're getting people who have needs and who have things that they want to offer and donate to the community, just by making connections with people. And so this is a place, cleveland.recovers.org, where people can request any sort of need that they might have. We had actually a man in Australia find our site because we were popping up while other mutual aid networks were popping up, and we were connected to mutual aid, to those mutual aid networks via technology, which has been helpful because we can all ask each other best practices and stuff. There's a man who found our site in Australia. His mother lives here in Cleveland by herself. And he was very, very concerned because she was running out of toilet paper. Within 24 hours, she had a huge container of toilet paper on her door, contactless delivery, right? And we got this letter from this man, saying, I'm so grateful that the community of Cleveland is caring for each other this way. And I'm so grateful that I could, submit this request on behalf of my mother who doesn't engage in social media or doesn't have access to technology, right? And so we've done a lot too to figure out how are we going to advertise this and get people connected offline. So we have, we have phone numbers that people can call. We have people are welcome to submit requests on behalf of other people. But this is just a great way to really learn how to support and defend each other in a non-hierarchical way. And so we're not trying to do this as the food bank, which does get government funding and has this amazing impact that they're able to transfer, right? We need the food bank as long as we're living under food scarcity, until we have food sovereignty, until we have agroecology. We need that food bank, but not everyone can get there, right? And they don't have enough volunteers to make deliveries, right? And so we need other solutions for people with other needs. And so this is one way that we decided to do that. But we also have all of the social media, because we also want to create platforms where people can have dialogues, right? We need people to get to know each other, but also to be vulnerable with each other about what is really hurting us. As I mentioned before on IRTF's page, what I was highlighting, like we know that we're in this place, some of us, in deeper crisis, lots of folks with unemployment running out, lots of folks affected by the fact that there's going to be $600 cuts to people's compensation, right? All of these things are really exacerbated as I mentioned, by some of us with certain lived realities. And so we need a place for people to talk about that, and also really to come together to really fight the other pandemic that we're living in, right? We're living in an uprising, and we've just heard our local government officials call racism a public health crisis. And we have had way too many high profile cases in our city. The reason why I'm able to support movement workers like Black Lives Matter, like other organizations that are popping up, like the Lake Erie Native American Council, is because we've been in the streets with them for 8 years. We've been in the streets with them since Tamir died, since Timothy died, since Melissa died. We've been in the streets with them since Tanisha died, right? And so because of those relationships, and because those relationships are based on trust, on accountability, on solidarity, we're able to support movement organizers as well. So this community forum that we've created for a pandemic also has been a hub of organizing in many ways. It's been a place where people can come together to learn about different actions that are coming up, and also to support those actions, even if you can't physically be there. So I dropped some link in our private chat that could be.
And we'll actually be sharing all the links that everybody is sharing, so that everybody who's on this, who's watching it on YouTube, will get access to the link.
Great. If we can pull up the one I shared, the first one I shared in the chat.
Go to that, just 1 second.
I have some examples of how we've used storytelling to support movement organizers in this moment. And so
the Facebook page that you want?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll bring that up.
And so it's been really amazing. I know I love IOB because of their matching work and everything, but I think that there's something really psychological about seeing your friends donate. And there's a pressure, right? There's an obligation, especially when it's for my best friend's birthday, right? But if anyone of you have been out in the streets with us, you know that these sound systems are not being heard across a crowd of 1,000, right? And so my friend had a birthday coming up, and we got permission from BLM to amplify their work. And in one day, we raised $2,600.
Wow.
In 24 hours. And if you read the story that Aiden wrote, if you can scroll down a little bit, he talks about, he's a musician, and he talks about the ways that Black and Indigenous artists, but particularly Black artists, have influenced his work, and how much he, how much benefit, how much joy, how much enrichment he's received from all of these amazing artists' contributions. That story is so compelling. That's why we raised $2,600 in less than 24 hours. If you bring up the next link, we have a story going right now. Many of you should know, but if you don't, that Cleveland was the site of a major FBI entrapment case, the Cleveland 4. And that is horrendous. And we know that leaders like Dr. King, like Angela Davis, have been targeted for wanting liberation for all people. And so we have a member of the Cleveland 4 who's been released from prison, who is wanting to give back by supporting people who are inside, in particular the Cuyahoga County Jail, because there's a jail coalition here in Cleveland that has been working really hard to address some deep systemic injustices. As many of you know, 9 people died at the jail within less than a year, and the jail coalition came together to really respond to that and to ask our local officials to do more. You might know that Oh, sorry, my brain is weird in COVID too. Time is weird, Zoom is weird, my brain sometimes falls out of my ear. But we know that the work that's being done by the Jail Coalition is addressing serious systemic problems, and we also know that that our work is working, because we've seen resignations from people who have committed who have perpetuated real systemic injustice, right? And anyway, so this is another great example. Someone telling their own story and being able to raise more than their goal in a day-long window, because we're training people as we tell stories. We're training people to learn how to support things in a grassroots way. We need, the politicians do it all the time. My average donation is $17 or $27 or whatever. Like, we need people to understand that that works and that matters, and that we have to contribute to the things that we care about, even if it's just $5.
And that's
right.
I mean, that is one of the things that I wanted to make sure people understand about storytelling. Well, two things really. One is, it is the story. It can be down to the individual level. It can be down to the need that one person has for a sound system. It can be down to the need for a person to help with a particular social movement. There's not just one story. The food bank has been really good, as you said, about getting the word out about what are the needs in the community and addressing those needs. But that doesn't mean that that covers everything. It doesn't mean that that covers all the things that are going on. And IOBI and your site and the SVP site tell very individual stories. LGBTQ Center, Phyllis has been telling the specific stories about the people that are being affected. And I think that's really the way, for the second point, is that's the way to get people to want to support you, is to be able to tell
That's
a
been the
solid
trend.
story. Yeah,
that's been the trend. It's that people want to give when there's a story involved, right?
Yeah.
And they actually sometimes only want to give when there's a story involved, which makes it hard for people to honestly to cover their overhead.
Yeah.
Right. And so we have to get people sharing more than just one story. Right. We need to be sharing many stories so we understand the collective impact, because it's not it's all of the stories added up. Right. And our goal is really to dismantle these systems. Right. So we need the food bank now, but we need to envision a world where we don't need it. And we need to figure out the steps that we need to get there. Right. So the last, if you could please pull up just one more link. Sure. It's clevelandstimiluspledge.com. And I want to bring that up because I want to go back to Dawn's point that we still have this need, right? It's here. It was here before. It's here now. It's going to be here later. And there are some of us who have been granted with more access to resources, right? And so one thing, yes, I am seeing cuts. A lot of my fundraising happens at in-person events. I'm so devastated that I can't have a Rhythms of Latin America gala because it's my favorite event of the year. I need joy and celebration and not just doom and gloom, right? But there are people who've, Rebecca Moore is a local lawyer. She put together this Cleveland Stimulus Pledge. She's an amazing individual, but there are other individuals who've done similar projects. There's a social justice pledge that's, I think Surge came up with, but this is a way to say, oh, you're still employed full time. Maybe some of that $1,200 could go to these people and these organizations who need it most.
That is terrific to mention. And I know, Dawn, did you want to add something about how these stories are told?
I was just saying that, like, Chrissy's doing my job for me. So, like, because, like,
we'll be in partnership for a long time.
I know you spoke on one of my panels for me too around racial equity and our match fund that we had for that. But the thing that I really want to pull out of there of your comments were, one, every little bit counts, right? So we give people an opportunity to set up donation levels and describe like what that donation level is doing, how it helps. So it could be, $5 provides 5 meals for people, or, $25 can, buy, 25 cubic feet of soil so they can, create garden plots. But, and so giving people an idea of where their money is going to is so important. And it gets to this point of training people who are donating, because like I tell people all the time, like the main reason, and I stole this from our CEO, the main reason that people give is because they've been asked to give. Like and even in that, asking is a construct of equity, because there are people out here who are assumed that they don't have anything to give, and so they're never asked. And if you are asking people who are not traditionally asked to give, what you're doing is you're training them, you're educating them on how to find their own value proposition to donate to things. And then what happens is you create this whole new construct of people who have power, because they see their power in their ability to give and what is important to them. And then I love using social media as a platform to raise money. I do just want to add one tiny caution that not everybody is on social media. So keeping that in mind. Like for
not everybody's on
broader,
the same social media either too.
Not everybody's on the same social media, or not everybody is actually on social media or know how to use it well. I'm the first person to say, don't ever ask my mother for anything on social media. You might just get like a crystal ball emoji as a response, and then we're not going anywhere. We're not doing anything. So some people are have taken hiatuses from social media, especially now. So I say don't leave money on the table. So there are a bunch of different ways that you can ask people for support. Social media is one great way of doing it, as Chrissy has shown. There's a bunch of different platforms, but just remember that you may be telling the same story in different platforms and in different ways, again, over and over and over again. And so just keeping those things in mind. But I think drilling down to even the person who's never given before can potentially give, if you tell the story right, if you're asking them to, if you're training them to give and meaningfully give from themselves.
Yeah, all the platforms, and Chrissy has just sent in on chat, all the platforms are important to make sure that you can, when you have a story put together that you can tell, you want to think about how you can modify it for the different platforms that you're going to be saying this on. And we've seen with the COVID-19 issues that a lot of foundations have come up with their COVID-19 funds. Cleveland Foundation has a COVID-19 fund that they brought in a lot of different funds from across all the foundations in Greater Cleveland. Akron has one, Lorain has one. There are so many different ways that that story is required to be told in order to open up potential funding. We at Candid try and make it possible for you to understand how to write a grant proposal, but just writing a grant proposal isn't the one story that you need to tell. You need to be able to modify it. You need to be able to put it in a format. Maybe the best way to do it, it looked like the Facebook fundraising that the two examples that Chrissy used worked really well, and it directed and got the little amount of money that was necessary to get these projects off the ground. You need a big grant. You need to work with the foundations. They're not going to take the same story. They're going to need it in a different format. So that's the way that storytelling works with fundraising, I think. I want to just pause for a second and ask if there are any questions that have come through. I know Sam's been monitoring the YouTube and the chat. Is there anything that we've heard, Sam?
so far we haven't had any questions.
We've answered all the questions that anybody has ever asked about any of these issues. That's amazing.
I think Phyllis has a question.
Phyllis, you have a question. Go for it.
I wanted to go back a little bit to the two examples of the stimulus opportunity to, and this is, it struck me because my mother is 73, is retired, worked for 30 years for General Motors, doesn't have a lot of money, but when she received that, called me and was almost like she had this sense of urgency that she couldn't, that she got that money and she saw what was happening in the world and she wanted to give some of it away. And I started thinking about my son who just came home from college and is living with me right now, moving out today, but still, you know, like I started thinking about, you know, like, oh, I could use some money, or my, you know, your grandson. And that wasn't what she was interested in. And then I slowed down a bit, and she really was interested in giving to a local organization that she felt like was having a great impact. It turned out to be the food bank, keeps coming up. It turned out to be the food bank. And she's a recurring donor to the food bank. And this is someone who, again, like I said, doesn't have a lot of disposable income, but has enough that she, when she got the stimulus, she wanted to give, and now will be a recurring donor. And I think this brings up the point of, listening to people and getting their stories and staying curious as nonprofit folks, staying curious about the people who are not giving to your organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
They might not be informed enough to know how to understand that you are that you always are seeking donations or volunteer time. And so, I got her on to the food bank. She feels good about it. And I thought about the soul of philanthropy, right? The soul of philanthropy is a movement here. They came out strong, really strong last year with a lot of opportunities for people like me and others to tell their stories about how Black people give. And it might not look like what we're used to when we're taking a look at and analyzing our records and Donor Perfect and things like that. And so again, we don't want to miss this opportunity. And if we combine that to our topic around storytelling, staying curious, it also helps with doing anti-racism work, right? So it's not enough to say I'm not a racist. You got to be doing some anti-racism work. And so part of anti-racism work, I believe, is staying curious about the other, and staying curious about the other. And your curiosity, you're getting to know them, and you're getting to know what they're interested in, and you're getting to know that they're actually, that Black people are philanthropic. I don't have $200,000 in my name on the building yet, but there's an opportunity here that we don't want to miss. And I think a great way to get to that opportunity is to really genuinely be curious. Like if you are an organization and most of the people that you serve are Black and brown people, or even 50%, and you look at your donor records and your donors, and you're doing good donor stewardship, and you know who your donors are and your investors are, you're not seeing people of color, and we live in Cleveland and there are people of color here. What can you do? Can you get them to tell their stories if they are not in a way where it's kind of like a dog and pony show? We're really good at propping people up and saying, look at them, poor them, here's something, until you do the next person. And let's get over that, right? Let's get into getting to know people and what they care about. We all are missing out on a large demographic of 70-something Black women. I'll tell you that right now. My mom and her friends are giving, caring humanitarians, and we're not asking them for money. But my mom is sending it places, like she would send to UNICEF, or because what would she get? She would get the story of a child, of a family, of a village. And so let's think about that. Let's think about who we are close to in our communities here in this region around storytelling, and ask them. I love how one of my colleagues, Brian Lutz, when he's engaging with young people for our QU programming here, he sometimes says, tell me your whole life story. Because he really wants to like sort of like break the ice with this person to try to get them comfortable, and like he's curious about them. He genuinely is, and people open up and they share what they want to share, how they want to share, but we do get those stories. So think about taking a look at Solar Philanthropy and what they're doing. I don't know if they're taking a hiatus now with COVID and the things that are going on, and
we did put the website on the YouTube channel, so
the art of storytelling there, and think about who you're missing and get curious about them, not in the objectifying way, but like real curiosity. Wouldn't you want to know my mom?
I want to know your mom. That's terrific. That is great. And that's the real truth, is that the story that might be swaying a person and that might be connecting to a person, you may have that story yourself. You may be able to tell that story. I posted something on Facebook, I can't remember, it's a friend of mine's birthday fundraiser, and I just posted it and I said, this is a really great thing, maybe you should support it. I didn't even think anything about it. My sister, who knows nothing, doesn't know my friend, doesn't know anything about this, just like, that really moved me, that really made me excited. There is a question that has come through, and I don't know which of you or all of you might be able to share this, but we're talking about telling stories in different ways, in different formats. What if you're in a situation where you're just not able to get the word out about, and we have a person on chat who is in a small rural area in a small nonprofit trying to tell this story. What advice might you have for somebody like that who's trying to get that word out? Any of you, Caroline, Chrissy, Don, Phyllis?
I think about the model around popular opinion leaders, or people within the culture, the community of the person. Who is the person who is the leader? You want, there can be all kinds of leaders. So someone who's positive, and maybe identifying if there are others in that small community or in that culture or organization, identifying those within the community who are the popular opinion leaders, if you will, or who are folks who people trust and look up to and listen
Don's
to.
calling them the culture bearers, I think.
There you go. Yeah, let's get those, connecting to those folks. It might be something that you've done already, but I think it's an effective model if you can support them around telling their stories or the stories of the community to others, and lifting other folks up. And sometimes they, I still get coaching, like around communication. So sometimes if you see something that comes out and my signature on it, it's my voice, it's my tone, but Lauren has written it for me, or Mallory has written it for me. So it does take some skill and expertise, but we have these stories in us. They're in our ground, and so what I guess I'm saying is, try not to do it alone. If there's other people who folks listen to, and you can connect with them and support them, like by way of, if it's the IOB tool or resources, in learning how to tell the story in a way that's impactful, you might get somewhere. And it is a bit of a journey, right? So you might have the story down, and the ways to get to the story is down, right now, and then it changes, right? We're used to that, though, in our work, around being able to pivot. If you haven't noticed, many of us were able to pivot. We have the capital to pivot.
Pivot is the key word that I keep hearing coming out of this.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to contribute to that or add comment?
I think it's what Phyllis just said. It's team building. And by so I coach people on how to ask people for money. But before you can even get to the point of asking people for money, perhaps you have to build your team. And so building your team takes, in a way, the same, in my opinion, this is Dawn speaking, it takes the same set of skills that you're going to use to tell your story, to ask people for money, that you're going to have to use. Like, you have to get these people on your side to go out and ask for money too. So you have to build this story up and say, hey, I'm going to be asking people for money, and I want you to help me ask people for money. And here's why I believe in this, or here's why this nonprofit exists here in this particular community. And I've seen it across the country on our platform where small rural communities, close-knit communities have banded together and built campaigns around something that's important to them. Like Chrissy's group, the COVID pandemic response, there was a group out in Kansas and they did have match dollars, but I mean, I think match dollars are something that, you know, kind of sits off to the side and is a great incentive, but it's not always the magic wand. What they did was it was a group of people in a county in Kansas, Missouri, one of those states. No, it was Kansas. And they were raising funds to help community members affected by COVID, even though they didn't have any COVID cases in their particular county. But the people who are in that county leave the county to go to work, and they are affected by loss of wages, loss of jobs, and people being able to pay their utility bills. And they raised money to support folks paying their utility bills. This is a very small rural, you know, kind of community. And the lady who led it, she was like 70 years old, retired. And she was like, I just want to make sure that my neighbors and the people that are here in this community, that we're taking care of each other. And this is a way for us to do it. And so she had to have this conversation with the folks that at the small nonprofit that she works at or volunteers at part-time to be able to say, hey, can we do this here? And so the key is build a team, but then start hyper local. Start with your family, your friends, your coworkers, the people you play baseball with, the person who would normally meet you at Becky's, the best wings in the city of Cleveland.
Becky's is gonna owe us money for that.
Yes, listen, best wings, I'm telling you. So when we can all get together again, meet me at Becky's for some wings. But like, those people, like, instead of buying me a bottle of beer or, you know, putting a round on you right now, take that money and donate it to this thing that's important to me. So you start there and then you build your way out. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy, but there are some basic things that I think ring true across the board. One of them is like, a lot of us have someone in our network, in our family, you know, in our close-knit network that will just give you money just because they believe in you. I got an uncle. I did an IOB campaign. I was like, yeah, I'm doing this thing and it's around literacy. And he was like, yeah. Here, tell me how I need to give you money. Because he's just going to give me the money because he wants to support his needs. That's cool. And you should be talking to those people. So build your team, but then also communicate with the people that are most trusted in your circles, and then go from there. But building that team is
Phyllis is adding in that it doesn't have to be a large gift. It's a committed gift. It's your $5 to $10 every year is a commitment, or volunteer hours, people donating time, people donating small things. That's enough to get people connected to what you're doing and to keep the support going. And it has an impact. It really does. I want to leave room for Sam to be able to talk about another way of telling your story through using the GuideStar website. But I want to make sure I ask all of you for just some future advice, for some advice that you would give our audience. It's been really great to hear about telling stories and all the different ways you can do it. What advice would you give, knowing that the situation right now is not plannable? You know, I look at the New York, the coronavirus map of the United States every day, and I go, what's going to happen tomorrow, or what's going to happen in a week? And I don't know, that kind of thing. What would be advice that you would give to people? And you don't have to, it doesn't have to be the perfect advice. Just what would you say to people? Anybody?
I would just say coming at your messaging from as many different directions as you can, because you never know what will be the hook that brings someone in, and reframing versus asking for money, although you are, but reframing it as inviting someone to be a part of something, and then finding different ways that people might want to become a part of you. Some people are huge number people, and it's really important to them to see the statistics and to see the numbers and to see your impact. And then some people are just really going to be hooked by a heartfelt story. So it's coming at your asks from all those different ways. And as Phyllis is bringing up too, not everyone is on social media and, trying to call people if you can't meet people in person, and a multitude of different ways, just trying to come at it from every different angle, because as you said, things are changing all the time, and you don't want to just be hooked into one way.
Yeah, and I will get caught up by stories that I wasn't even, aware of. University Settlement had a Black Lives Matter poster on their building that was ripped down a couple of times. And they just asked for a couple of donations to put a vinyl poster up there that couldn't be ripped down. And they got a wealth of people supporting them. And it was a great story that caught me. And that's the thing that you're looking for. That is a really great part of it. Other advice, other comments, other suggestions? Thanks, Caroline.
Breathe.
Breathe.
Breathe. Seriously. Like, I was going over, I was texting a friend, and we were having a discussion about how, like, it's kind of exhausting to constantly answer the question as a Black person, well, how are you? I'm the same as I was before you woke up. So breathe.
Breathe.
Breathe. You know what I mean? Like it take a moment. Like, I promise you, 400 years of oppression, shown in all of its glory by a pandemic, still doesn't remove the fact that these things were happening before. So again, yes, your story was important before this pandemic. Your story was important before people were trapped in their homes and were forced to pay attention. Breathe.
Love it.
Because this is not a sprint. We are just in mile 1 of a 26-mile marathon. Breathe. And yes, and take time for yourself, because if you're out here doing this work, if you're out here telling these stories, if you're the one with the pressures of trying to make a difference and get something done, you won't be here for the long haul to see the fruits of your work if you just don't chill the hell out every once in a while. This work is important. It has been important. It will continue to be important. Take a breath.
I'm going to need you to be my motivator every morning, Dawn, if that's okay. That would be really great. Appreciate that. Phyllis and Chrissy, anything to add, Chrissy?
Yeah, I think that we often, we as nonprofits, often fail to acknowledge the power that we hold. We are institutions, unfortunately, and with that comes institutional power. And even when we're struggling and it feels like we have no power and we're helpless trying to serve the people that we're trying to serve, we still do have power. So we need to acknowledge that. I think we need to tell the truth about our situations, about the realities that we're living in. And I agree with Dawn, rest is revolutionary. I learned that from the NAP ministry. And there was a great exhibit at the MOCA by the NAP ministry recently that my favorite curator helped to curate. So I just want to plug that. And I think that when we tell the truth, then we are also being revolutionary. I think that there's too many times where we're speaking in code and we're trying to hide what we really mean. You know, when you say something is interesting, what do you really mean by interesting? You know, that's just a word we use when we mean something else, right? And so I think all of these things work together to make an ecosystem, right? And so we need to be in coalition. Coalition fundraising is more and more important. People want to see that you can play nice and work with each other. You know, that's IOB is so successful because they are coalition builders. I think we also we're trying to be in coalition, and we also have platforms that we need to share. So that's part of acknowledging our power, right? We don't just want our story, we want all of the stories, as I mentioned, to be amplified, right? So I work really hard to use my platforms to amplify other people's stories with permission, in mutual relationship, respectful, reciprocal, etc. But that we need to amplify, and we need to share our power, because we need to become nimble. If we want to build people power, if we want to fully serve our clients, if we want to really survive, as Don just said, this is a marathon. So we have to train each other, not just in fundraising, but in those volunteer hours, in the way that we talk to each other, in our own systems, in the way that we expect things of our workers without giving them a living wage, in the way that we perpetuate cycles of productivity that are not realistic or sustainable for people who have families to take care of and lives. You know, that we want people to be full human beings. We want people to have joy, to learn, to breathe, as Dawn said, right? And we can't expect them to get that done if we don't give them any time to do it. You know, unfortunately, the work is always going to be there. So we also have to really feel comfortable knowing that we can't do it all, but the Talmud says, right, that we have to do all that we can, even if we can't do it all.
That's great. Thank you, Chrissy. Phyllis, did you have a final thought?
I started thinking, you know, after folks are talking about coalition building and how important that is, and, you know, how it has enabled, you know, at least my organization to really get things done. We allow people to bring their expertise here, and we share our expertise on what it means to be LGBTQ, you know, like we're subject matter experts, and we found that to work. So I like the idea of coalition building. And then I also, you know, I started thinking, I forget who said it, but it's a popular saying, speak even if your voice shakes. And it can be very scary to put your voice out there, to tell your story, because people will want to pick it apart and challenge you. You know, there is not a time that we send out an e-newsletter that we don't get someone saying something about a grammatical error, or maybe even challenging us about the information, which I think is okay. To not be afraid of that, and to not, like, you know, people can be pretty cruel, or, you know, get on their soapboxes about, you know, how communication should happen. And that in the past has kept me from feeling free enough to really share. So learn what you're good at, and build that muscle around your storytelling. So I'm not as good as sitting in front of a tablet and writing out a compelling story. But if I can get you in front of me and tell you my story and show you And you can hear the inflection of my voice. And I use Black vernacular if I'm talking to Black people. And I use language that I've learned to be able to use around connection to someone, not faking it. I don't want like white people to use Black vernacular and have people looking at them like they're, nuts, but like in a way that you're comfortable because you have had some sort of relational experience with the person. There's something that you can connect to that you're both interested in. So speak, even if your voice shakes. The critics are going to be there, and practice makes progress, right? Perfection is somebody else's jam. You know what I mean? But if practice makes progress, and so continue to tell the stories, maybe in little snippets. And we have a way here after working with a communications firm where we have we can tell our mission and vision in these many words, in these many words, and these many words. And it takes some time. I tell you, to really learn how to get those kinds of things in place. But once you do, and then you have them. So somebody calls for a story or somebody needs a story and you have them curated already. And they're real stories, but you have them ready on the go. And I feel a lot of sort of like compassion for smaller organizations who might not have, large budgets to be able to use some of the bells and whistles to get that out there. You can feel free to call on me. I'm sure there are other organizations that you can call on. And if there's anything that I can do to help by using our resources in terms of the talent here, because there's a lot of people smarter than me here around helping an organization tell their story, we would be happy to do that. We came from somewhere, we're going somewhere, we're not done. I want to learn from all of you and have today, and I want to also be able to teach and share. Speak even if your voice shakes, and practice makes progress.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Phyllis. Dawn also says, yeah, call me. That's the other advice I'm giving. So all of the people that we have in the panel today, and I know they can't see you, but and nobody can hear the applause, but I want to applaud all of you for everything you shared and the resources that you are and the people that you are helping people tell the story, helping people speak even if their voice shakes. I love that idea, and I love the sense of freedom that gives you, and it makes me very excited. So we're not quite done, because I do want to talk about one way that you can tell your story, and we're going to have Sam Petticord talk about that now. But thank you very much, all of our panelists, for great sets of advice and storytelling yourselves. It's just great. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. I really appreciate all your advice.
I'm going to share my screen again here and turn this over to Sam Petticord, who's going to tell you about GuideStar. So Sam.
Thank you. Thank you. I know I went off camera, but I was like nodding profusely throughout the whole presentation. So thank you, everyone. Briefly, I'm just going to use our remaining time today to tell you how GuideStar.org can help you tell your story as a way to complement what our speakers just gave us. And so we already talked about who Candid is, but I just want to take a moment and show how our mission statement applies to storytelling. And Phyllis gave a really great example of this when she talked about her organization putting together a case study. No matter how big your organization is, in order to do a case study, or really to do that, you need to be able to effectively marry storytelling with data. And so funders want to see that data. People who are just considering volunteering or joining your organization in support or solidarity, they want to see the data. And so quickly, I'm just going to go through a few ways that we can help you pull together all of that data and help communicate how that can uplift the work that you're doing. All right. First, we're going to start with a really quick pop quiz. I just want to ask everybody, and I know that this is going to be, you're not able to answer, but how many active nonprofits do you think that there is in the state of Ohio? All right, everybody has a number in their head? Okay. For the sake of time, I'm going to just tell you that there's actually 72,785 active nonprofits in the state of Ohio. And the reason I'm telling you this is because it's important in the context of storytelling. You have to realize that your organization is one of many places that provide options for volunteering, for quality programming, and your organization needs to stand out. If you want people to donate their time, their talent, their treasure, which is a phrase I'm stealing from the Soul Philanthropy, and if you haven't checked it out, as Phyllis mentioned, it's amazing, check it out. You want them to donate those three things to your organization. You need to be able to tell them in a succinct way why your organization deserves their support, why it stands out above all the other organizations that are doing similar work or that are serving a similar geographical area. And so ultimately what that boils down to is trust. And how your organization can grow trust, especially in a time when there's so much misinformation in the world, is simple. Research shows that nonprofits can establish trust by showing off their accomplishments. It's the number one way that they can show how they're serving their mission and they're living up to the values and the mission statements that they put forth. And it's important to, thanks, Dave, hold on. If it's important to, that your organization build trust, whether it's a old organization or it's a, 500-pound gorilla in the room, or if your organization is really small and new, or maybe you are just serving a new population or expanding to a new area, all of those things are okay. And, if your organization doesn't have the funds to hire a fancy web designer, that's okay. We want to be able to help you, as our panelists mentioned, we want to be able to help you use our information, our platforms to tout your accomplishments and to share your stories. And GuideStar can help you do that. It can help you share your data, your accomplishments, your programs, your services to the world for free. And so we really recommend claiming a nonprofit profile to use it to amplify your visibility and your credibility. And best of all, it's free. And so creating a nonprofit profile is easy, it's free, and quickly I'm going to take you through the steps on the initial steps, how to get started. There's lots of resources if you need help with this later on, but we're going to help you get started and how you can start using this tool to marry with storytelling. And so a quick note here, most people don't realize this, but if your organization filed a 990 or 990 EZ, which they should be, your information is already on GuideStar. So you're already listed. Your profile is just incomplete. And so you want to check that out. You want to make sure that the story that this site, and I'll talk about our partner organizations, are telling of your nonprofit is the version of the story you want to be told. It's telling the complete story. And so there's a really great way that you can do this. You can just go to guidestar.org, and then at the very top of the header, there is a section that says update nonprofit profile. And you can click that, and then there'll be a tab that says get started. And it'll take you step by step. And so your nonprofit is what you make of it, as the slide shows. You can see on the left here that this organization is just what is being sourced out of the IRS. And so it's just coming out of their 990 information. It's really basic. It's not really impressive. It doesn't tell you much. On the other hand, the organization on the right has taken the time to show off, their work and to use it to fully enhance their story. You can see here in the bottom right-hand corner that it links to all their social media tabs so they can further amplify the work that they're doing by linking users directly to their channels. It talks about their mission. It tells you about how to get in contact. It helps you look more credible, really. And so pro tip there, if you're not sure how to use this information, you can easily encapsulate this information, and then you can use it as a reference point. As Phyllis mentioned, sometimes it's helpful to have this in many different ways. So if it's helpful to have this in 250 characters, it's helpful to have this in a one-page LOI, it's helpful to have this in executive summary. But this is a place that everything can live, and your staff and you and everyone can use it to access anytime they need to. So if you're thinking right now, why bother? People can just look up my 990 if they want to learn about my organization. Well, then you probably haven't been spending much time paying attention to the speakers today, because your 990 is not a great way to tell your story. It really isn't. Your 990, as you see here, this is a particularly bad example, but it's hard to read. It's hard to read. It's hard to gain an idea of what your nonprofit does based off of a tax form. It doesn't have any narrative to it. It doesn't really communicate what your organization does, let alone is it easy to comprehend for someone who doesn't do this work, or who, might just casually want to donate, or casually looking for an organization to get involved. They're not going to pull your 990 and read through it. They really aren't. At a minimum too, your 990s are 10 to 12 months old. And so even if you just let GuideStar auto-populate your data off of your 990s, the information's old. So think about all the work that your organization has done in the last year, and imagine it not being last 3 months. Yeah. And imagine that work not being a part of the story that you tell about your organization, just leaving all that out. It's not the whole story. And so, yeah. So, and here's another pro tip. If you populate if you populate the financial information, it's so much easier for the user to really get a sense of whether or not your organization is in good standing, to whether or not you're sustainable. It's so much more clear. You get these fancy graphs that we create for you, and they're dynamic and they're interactive. And, I've actually even screenshotted these and used these in proposals, because it's probably better than what I could create in Excel, to be honest with you. And so it helps, it helps show that you're not only are you transparent because you're willing to talk about money. And as Don has mentioned several times, it's hard to talk about money. But this is putting it all out there. This is saying, look, world, this is where we are. This is where we get our money. This is who funds us. Here's all of our information. And what's great about these is that once you share this information, you get seals of transparency. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But it kind of helps amplify your chances of donations. And operational information is really important too. People want to see who's in charge. I want to know who's running who's steering the ship. I want to know how many employees you have. I want to know who's on your board. And also now we give you the option to share your diversity information. So if you have, a diverse board, and you should, and if it reflects the people you serve, it should, this is a place to highlight it. This is a place where you can explicitly show how your organization is representing and constructed of the people you serve. And so take the time to fill out that section. I mentioned these guys. These are the seals of transparency. We release these every single year. You can get a new 2020 version and you can add it to your site. This is a really easy way for people to visually recognize that your organization is transparent and to see at what level of information you're sharing. And the best part about these seals is that we've made it really easy for you to share them on your website, on your LinkedIn page, on your Facebook, and they're usually linked. So if you click on the seal, it takes you directly to your GuideStar page. And so you can see, you can directly link people to the two. We have research showing that having a seal of transparency that links you to the Donate Now page and links you directly to the organization's profile can help increase virtual contributions by 53%. So that's a big deal right now, especially when all the in-person events are being canceled. And right now it's harder than ever to get people to come to, another conference or another, e-walk or whatever it is. And so, if you're striving for more donations, and we all are during this time, think about how this can help communicate the work that you're doing. And then if, we call it growing your identity online. Do you ever wonder how those Facebook birthday fundraisers and the ones that Chrissy mentioned and the ones that you've seen online, how Amazon Smile is linked? Well, all those little blurbs that you see that pop up that talk about the organization and ask you to donate to that organization, all of that in the back end is controlled by GuideStar. And so we're helping contribute the information, and we're pulling that information out of your GuideStar profile. So if your GuideStar profile information is wrong, those little blurbs and those little pop-ups will be incomplete as well. But we have tons of partners. We're fueling, if you see this page here, there's over 250 network partners that we're actually fueling right now with our information out of GuideStar. And so if you are trying to get money from any of these organizations, or if you are looking to see how you can increase your profile on Google nonprofits or with donor advised funds or some of the bigger names in the game, it's all powered by GuideStar. And so that's why it's really important that not only do you tell your story, but your story is up to date on GuideStar, so people can have a more complete picture of the work that your organization is doing. And so I know that was really quick. I didn't have a lot of time to run through it all, but I encourage you all to claim your profiles if you haven't done so already. It's super easy, it's free. And you can use us as a vehicle to show off the work that your organization is doing. You can, there's lots of assistance out there if you aren't tech savvy, or if you maybe have never created a profile for your organization. I highlighted this subpage here, which is help.guidestar.org. And there's YouTube channels, there's all kinds of stuff out there that'll really help, fill you in on all the tips and tricks. But really, I just encourage you to not only, take all the advice that you were given today, but also use the data. Use data to tell your story and how that can be a powerful way to communicate your message. So
thanks, Sam. I appreciate that.
Any questions on that part?
I will just add that I've been encouraging people to fill out their GuideStar profile before we were a GuideStar member, but I didn't realize just how much it's used by the funders, by the donor advised fund managers that are looking to find out different nonprofits, and the community foundations that are looking to direct their donor advised funds. They use GuideStar and they do the research to try and find who's sharing the most data. They can invest in you, they can give to you if they know more about you, if they know your story, and if you tell a story that's different than the very short story that you tell on the 990. So that's why we're encouraging all nonprofits of every size to go to GuideStar and claim your profile, because otherwise somebody else is in charge of your story, or your account is in charge of your story. Somebody who is maybe not well-versed in what's going on right now with your organization. You want to use We Care for CLE, and you want to use some of the other resources we've heard about today to get your stories out. This is the basic story that you can keep, and it's free for you to control. Any other questions or anything else from anybody? Well, I want to thank you guys. I have a couple of upcoming workshops that I'm going to just promote real quickly here. We have a new one on finding new donors that is coming out on July 28th. These are virtual, by the way. You can do them from anywhere. And you can sign up at that bit.ly link that you see there. And we're doing another proposal writing boot camp, which is usually our 3-day intensive thing where you have to drive and like devote 3 full days of your life to, and it's very, very hard. We made it virtual, and it is now something that you can do to get the most intensive proposal writing training. And I swear this is all the advertisement I'm doing today. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Natalie. Did you have anything else to add today?
Yes, I just want to thank our panelists, Caroline, Chrissy, Dawn, and Phyllis, for sharing your insights into the critical value of storytelling for networking and fundraising efforts, especially during this really challenging time. I would also like to thank Dave for moderating our panel discussion, and Sam for leading the GuideStar demo. And just everyone who spoke this morning shared incredible information and resources that I know will be beneficial for our audience. And finally, a very special thank you to our viewers for taking the time to connect and learn with us today. Stay safe and have a great day.
Thanks all.